81, 12, 4, 39. Broadcast. I worked in a theme park. I have more stories to tell.
We worked in a major theme park. There are stories here, and we have stories to tell. Volume 2. By Faceless Sphinx. Used with his kind permission. Before we begin, we ask that you consider supporting work like this by liking and subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. It helps us continue to provide you with real, AI-free content. Thanks very much. In this second volume of our collection, employees, also known as cast members, relate their stories of the bizarre, anomalous, and unexplainable while working at theme parks across the globe. Account number 1.
So I'm not sure I should be telling you the story. Are you sure it won't get back to me? My management is difficult. No, you're completely anonymous here. I promise. Nobody will ever know it's you. Alright, so I work at the big park. The big one. The one everybody thinks about when they think about big parks. The one they confuse with the other one in California. Getting a clue now? Hope so. Now, as a general rule, employees here are called cast members, as they are at most major theme parks these days. But there's a misconception, and that is that we hire children to be part of the cast. We do not. We don't have any minors working there. Not a one, aside from a few guest celebrities and parades. This particular resort has always had a policy that prohibits hiring anybody younger than 18. It has always been that way. Allegedly for security and child labour reasons, but the park has always had the policy to the point that even child roles in stage productions have to be played by young-looking actors. Yeah, you say, but there was a little boy who played Peter Pan in... No, it wasn't. You think it was, but it wasn't. There are no children working there. There never have been. There never will be. And in my position, there now, I assure you that I'm in a place to confirm that. The problem is that you, as a cast member or a guest, will very likely see children performing in the park if you're there frequently enough. They usually congregate near the rides that feature a theme heavily linked to children. There's a famous one with Mechanical Kids, for example, not quite animatronics, who sing and dance, and sometimes they show up there. Other times they show up near the big Progress themed ride. You know the one with animatronic kids from throughout history playing with toys and interacting with the changing world. Every so often you'll see a page at the castle too, and he or she will certainly look like a costumed cast member. They aren't. They never are. My first day, after training was finished, they sent me over to help work the gates at the haunted house. It's a very popular gig for a cast. A big deal to be able to work there. Great environment, good cast, famously friendly cast leads. It's a fantastic ride too. It's hugely popular with guests, so lines can get long despite the ride being 50 plus years old at this point. Sometimes the wait can be well over an hour. Now, over the years we've installed a lot of ways for guests to keep busy in that line. To keep kids and excited guests calm and keep sober adults sane. There are interactive areas in various rides, games, displays, and sometimes little plaques that detail the history of the ride. The one at the ride I'm referring to has a great interactive cemetery and churchyard set up. Occasionally, though we don't do it as nearly as much as it was in the 70s and the 80s, there are people who entertain long lines. They do comedy skits, sing songs, perform incredible dance routines. Some of the ones over in the Morocco section of the second park, those are incredible. Highly recommend you visit them. Anyway, that day the line was incredibly long, and it was unseasonably warm even for Florida. At the time, we allowed people to take ride vouchers. If a line was too long, vouchers would let them cash in later to get first in line. That system has been changed a bit, but at the time it was still a thing. Not an hour into my shift, a family approached me. 2 adults, I assume, who were the parents, and 2 small children, boys. They just came out of a line and had requested a voucher, which I was happy to give. I bent over and looked at the children. 2 little boys, as I said. Cute little fellas. Have you guys been on the ride before? I smiled. They shook their heads shyly. Is it scary? Said the slightly taller boy. No, it's just silly, I assured him. Do you want to know a secret? I said. Here's the truth. The only ghosts and monsters in the world, they're all good guys. They're there to protect little kids like you. No such thing as a bad monster or a bad ghost. That's just movies. People telling nonsense. They smiled a bit at that. We liked the little girl who was singing in the waiting area, said the woman, the one I presume was Mom. I think these boys had a little crush on her. She ruffled the hair of the smaller of the two. The boy, I assume, was a younger one. The girl? I asked, confused. Oh yeah, that precious little girl in a little dress, the man said. She had an amazing voice, made us all smile. The whole line lit up. It was clever having a girl made up to look just a little too pale, then directing her to sing beautiful songs. You'd think it would be really creepy, but it was charming, really. Quite charming. Will she be here tomorrow? The kids would love that. Now I blinked in confusion. I did try to hide it, but I don't think I was very successful. I'd never heard of such a thing at... But the cast manual says to be friendly and positive, and to never say no if you can avoid it. I'm not sure whether she will. I could say that at least very honestly. But I will be sure to encourage the cast lead to send her your way again if you like her. They liked that. That afternoon, when I was taking a late lunch, I met up with the very same cast lead, a man I'd met briefly in training. Did you have a good time working the mansion today, Paul? He asked. I told him that I did. Told him that I was impressed with the teaming of the line alone. Totally different perspective working it, I said. He asked me if the costume was uncomfortable. Not at all, I said. If 19th century butlers wore these instead of those starched awful things, I'm guessing they'd have been a lot happier. He laughed and commented that he thought the various additions to line entertainment helped the queue a lot, really added to the experience. They want them to feel like they're already on the ride, he said, referencing management. I don't think they are quite that far along, but it does help them. No denying that. The singers were a real hit for sure. Singers? He asked. Do you mean the headstones of the kids? Or, the thing with the organ and the ghostly composer? That one? No, sorry, it was just a singer. Not singers. No instruments, I think, I said. He seemed a bit surprised by this. We only have the singers around Christmas now. Lovely voices, though. I cringe at carolers. Shyness. Not these. A good time even for me. I heard management is talking about getting rid of that programme, though. No, I said. This wasn't a caroler. She was one of the period costumers, dressed up in a little grace, apparently made up to look like a friendly ghost girl. I think that was the idea. She sang songs. Period costumers? He said, raising an eyebrow. Yes, that little girl. I haven't met her. I hear she's quite... His face changed slightly. I wouldn't say it drained a colour, but it did drain of that previous joy. We don't have children working here, pal. Well, maybe she was a little person and the people who saw them were being unintentionally ignorant. We do have little people. I know them well. None of them work as singers. He interrupted. A little girl, he repeated. You say she was dressed to look like a friendly ghost. I got that impression, I said, somewhat deflated by his shift towards seriousness. Pale makeup, they said. These people said you'd think she was creepy, but she had a beautiful voice that put everyone at ease, and I saw a twitch at the corners of his mouth. He shook his head. No singers. He paused and then looked at his watch. I need to get moving. I'll catch you next time, yeah. Maybe we can meet up for dinner the next time you work a late shift. He didn't wait for a response. It was only later that I learned we had not only no children in the cast, park-wide, but had never had them. I don't know what it was those people saw. I've tried to convince myself that maybe it was somebody's daughter, dressed up as if she belonged on the ride. But children have been banned from wearing costumes at that park since the early 1980s. And I'm not sure how you'd hide a full Victorian dress and makeup in a purse or a bag, find a corner of the park, change into costume, and avoid being noticed by security. I don't know who or what that was. We never spoke about the matter again.
Account number 2. In 2020, only a week before lockdown hit, I was working at the amazing Incredible Race at... It's a fun attraction and a good one to work. Now, every ride at the resort has at least one operations console, and every one of those consoles and a few call boxes scattered around the resort besides have these triangular orange buttons. When there's a serious security issue, you're supposed to press that button. Right next to that, there's a white button. That one you press if there's some other kind of emergency. So, around 3 p.m., the entire ride shuts down. I mean, it shuts down. The lights go off, and it's an enclosed ride, so it was so dark you could barely see your hand in front of your face. And the cars stopped. There was a smell, a palpable smell of burning tires. There shouldn't be a smell of burning tires in that ride. Never. Because there are no actual tires on or anywhere near that ride. It's not a glorified go-kart track on a rail like the one the mouse has. So, I assumed there was a fire. I hit the white button and we began the fire evacuation procedure. There's a list of things you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to go through them very quickly. You get somebody to the cars as quickly as possible and you offload the people on the ride. You get the people in line out first because they'll be blocking the ride otherwise. You make sure the emergency lights are on, and if they aren't, you make sure nobody trips, falls, and makes it worse for themselves and others. There's lots to do at once. We were about halfway through that when the fire guys showed up, in a hurry. A couple of them helped with evacuation, and another approached me. "You're the senior cast member at the moment?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm the safety lead today." He nodded. "You've done a good job here, but this..." He took a minute, he sniffed the air. "This ain't us." "Pardon?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "This isn't a fire. No sprinklers, no alarms. The smoke detectors don't have anything. And that smell... Buddy, I know that smell." In his defense, the smell was evolving. Something else. I can't quite describe it well with words, but it was like rubber, but with a tinge of sweetness and copper. "That smells like a fire," I said. "Maybe an electrical fire?" "Has anybody reported a fire?" he said, looking at the guests as they streamed out. It was a polite question, but firm. "No," I said. "I'm telling you," he repeated. "There was no fire. We'll get it evacuated and make sure everybody's okay. But," he said, "this isn't our department. I've been through this scenario before." We got the last guests out and were moving away from the building. Again, standard safety stuff. When the security officers came in. They were special security. Ballistic vests, helmets, rebreathers. We've seen them from time to time. Nice people, usually out of the scary gear, and they help out the standard security when they don't have to do their specialized duty. They work for a private security outfit called Yorick. I'm not sure if you've heard of them. One of them nodded hello, and she assured us that they'd handle it from there. "We'll give you the all clear when we've dealt with the problem," she said. And I still didn't know what the problem actually was. They entered the attraction, they locked the doors from the inside, and they stayed in that building for 3 hours, while the cast and I mingled in the rest area waiting for instructions. When the 3 hours had passed, we got the all clear, and we were told we could return to our shifts. No safety risk. We entered as the last Yorick guys were walking out. They smelled like burnt rubber and something sweet. There was still a tinge of copper in the air.
Most were removing their rebreathers and enjoying the fresh air outside. They had a tired look in their eyes, as if they'd been up to something fairly intense. Nobody seemed to be hurt, though. I looked toward one of them, someone who looked to be my age, and I said, "What the hell happened in there, man?" He considered and then shook his head with a weary smile, and he said, Just a trespasser hiding in the ride. We dealt with him. If it happens again, call the fire team just to be safe, but..." He looked back at the ride. "If it does happen, you'll probably see us again, too." You want a postscript? Well, I'm afraid there's not much to say. Not a lot of information out there, and I've asked questions around the park, and all I get are shrugs and ask somebody else's. But I did learn something interesting. I was talking to my shift lead about what happened. Wanted to know what he knew about these alleged intruders. He wouldn't say much, but he did say this. "Do you know anything about early auto racing?" he asked me. I told him I didn't. He told me that in this part of the world, rally racing was very popular very early on in the history of the automobile. Now, those cars were dangerous. The fuel cells weren't sealed. There were no safety restraints, no doors, no roll bars. The drivers didn't wear helmets. Sometimes the cars would carry 2, 3 people, driver, mechanic, spotter. And those wheels, they were extremely narrow. Those tires weren't any bigger than bicycle tires. All it would take would be a little rock or a narrow ditch, and everyone in that car would go flying, or, worse, they'd get pinned beneath it. And when a fire starts in an automobile without a sealed fuel cell, not the best way to go.
Account number 3.
Y'all want a story from me? All right, fine. But I'll take you up on your terms. No names. Nothing to link me directly, okay? You've heard of theme restaurants, right? Did you know that even Walt Disney wanted to do theme restaurants in the park? That the Enchanted Tiki Room was based on a concept for a Chinese restaurant? That's totally true. I used to work in a themed restaurant in a major theme park. The restaurant doesn't exist anymore, but it was real. For most of its run, I worked in a very busy position at one of the most elaborate restaurants on property at a very notable theme park. Not the largest, not even the most expensive of them, but it was a big restaurant. We'll call it Admiral Benbow's. That wasn't the name, but you'll probably see a pattern here. Now, Admiral Benbow's was supposed to be one of several themed restaurants attached to the biggest attraction of the park. As far as I know, 4 were started, but only 2 were actually completed for the original purpose. Admiral Benbow's is still attached to the same attraction, but now it has a different name and a different theme. The other one has long since vanished, but the rooms are still there, attached to the attraction, and used for something else. They don't acknowledge Benbow's. It's like it didn't even exist for the time it was there. It was a great idea, really. For a long time, I thought they'd given up on it. But at some of the other locations, it seems like they've brought back theme restaurants. Benbow's was attached directly to the big pirate ride. We'll call that ride Treasure Island, in a futile effort to hide what I'm talking about, okay? Now, the restaurant was designed to look like a seaside inn and tavern, as it would have looked during the golden age of piracy, so roughly the first half of the 18th century. It was a real masterclass in theming. From the floorboards to the ceiling, it looked like you were in a building built sometime in the late 1600s. Hell, it even smelled like it for the most part, like sea salt and tar mixed with old wood, the smell of a hearth, faint odors of pipe tobacco. Everyone was dressed appropriately for their roles, and every necessary bit of modern technology was very cleverly hidden, so that it looked like it belonged. My goodness, the toilets were so well hidden that we had to break theme just a bit and put up a sign to help people navigate to them. There was one large dining room with 2 smaller side galleries. parallel to the main room they'd built. A large, very realistic-looking bar, where tavern keeps would serve period beverages as well as the modern things we've all grown accustomed to in the Western world. So you could get grog, but you could also get grog without alcohol. You could get rum, ale, small beer even. But you could also get things like fruit juice, iced tea, and soft drinks. Nothing says 18th century seaside inn like a can of ice-cold Tab. Now, at the time the restaurant was built, characters, especially the big mascot types, were very popular. People, many of them adults, would come to the parks like ours and stand in line to get somebody like Winnie the Pooh's autograph. Management wanted to capitalize on this, so they started the trend of having costumed characters tour the restaurants. Now here's a big bit of fun trivia for you. The Black Knight actually used to tour at the... Did y'all know that? Must have been a challenge to navigate that dark dining room in full plate. There's another restaurant where a certain famous animated character would show up at the buffet, and he was soon joined by others. For Admiral Benbow's, it was Billy Bones. Now, Old Billy is a character who no longer walks the park. They've tried hard to erase him, but you can still find references online. He was a mascot character, one of the stranger ones, but very popular. Billy stood about 6 foot tall, though that's not nearly the tallest those mascot suits can get, and at least a good solid foot of him was the head alone. Billy was dressed in the stereotypical pirate captain's clothing, feathered bicorn, an embroidered waistcoat, a pair of swashbuckler's trousers with clumpy sailor's boots, a great wide sash of red worn tied at the waist, a long calico with wide, exaggerated sleeves, a cartoonish cross between a saber and a cutlass worn at his side. But then, there was Billy's Bones. Billy's head, his hands, and exposed parts of his chest and torso were made of a material meant to look like bone, a finely woven, pebble-textured fabric just slightly off-white, with black material in the spaces between the bones. It was an amazing bit of costuming. The fingers were so delicate, so well articulated, that you could believe they were the hands of a skeleton and not gloves. I remember thinking that the people who wore the Billy costume must have had skinny fingers to operate those. And then, the head, well, that was on another level. Billy's head was a great cartoonish skull. There were a pair of huge, wide black eye sockets worn above a little nose and a toothy skeletal smirk. There was even a little crack in the rough center of the forehead, with a black material beneath it making it look like maybe Billy had bumped his head into the beams on the gun deck one too many times. But, and this is important, Billy wasn't a scary skeleton. He was a cartoon, a silly, swaggering cartoon skeleton in pirate's clothing. Generally speaking, Billy would tour the restaurant at least 2 or 3 times a day. He would stride through the doors and somebody would shout, "Billy Bones on deck!" in English. Tavern casts would get in on the act and they'd holler back in their native languages, using the same phrase. Quite a spectacle. Always got a smile out of me. Well, when that was done, Billy would wave happily to everyone and begin an inspection of the restaurant. Weaving with surprising grace, his handler was barely needed, through each of the dining areas. And here's the thing. Everybody loved Billy Bones. Everybody. Billy, whomever it was they had playing the role, he just had a way with people. His operators was very good at telling when he'd be welcome, and which tables would feel less comfortable being visited by a costumed character. He'd visit with kids, especially the ones who seemed lonely or a bit neglected, and he seemed to have a sort of sixth sense for that. Billy was particularly well known for interacting with special needs kids. He'd make a big deal of showing them kindness. He'd sit there patiently while they poked and prodded at his costume. They hugged him and asked him questions. All the kids did that, but he had a way with special needs children and adults that really defies proper description. He was always extra patient with them, kind, never too much. Saw him gradually kneel down next to a little child with Down syndrome, who was amazed by just how tall he was. She hugged him for what must have been 5 minutes solid, and the operator took that embrace and gave it back fully. Hats off for the man or woman who it was wearing that suit that day. Now, Billy's most famous move involved his sword. They had a dish there, Billy's Treasure, a sort of baked Alaska-type concoction made in the shape of a treasure chest. It was often ordered by birthday parties and family gatherings, but there was a smaller version you could order that would serve a couple or a very small party. Either way, when Billy was there and they served Billy's Treasure, it was a big deal. They'd bring it out, make an announcement that somebody found Billy Bones' treasure, and Billy would get real excited. He'd wave his arms excitedly and he'd follow the servers to the table. They'd carry over to the table and light it on fire, as one does with baked Alaska, and then Billy would make a flourish of his big, dumb sword and slice it in half. People loved that part. That dish alone must have made this part a fortune, I reckon. I was never involved in the dessert prep, but it was quite a thing to behold. Pretty good, too. Now, as I say, everybody loved Billy. Everybody. Never saw a single person who didn't like Billy. Never met one. Until Tom. Tom Weller was the lead bartender, the tavern keep from the mid-1970s through 1985. Tom had come from Los Angeles via Las Vegas, then to London, then to Paris, then to us. He trained as a bartender before the war and apparently got his start in a very exclusive nightclub for early Hollywood types before he joined the U.S. Marines within hours of Pearl Harbor and fought in the Pacific Theater. I don't know a lot about his military career, but I will say that as a bartender, he was brilliant. The man was a true showman. He'd juggle bottles, set various drinks on fire, toss fruits into the air and slice them, do elaborate bits with cocktail swords and garnishes, and he was very good at getting the taste right too. I do not partake of alcohol myself, don't like the taste, but I do enjoy a good virgin cocktail from time to time, and he was good at both. Tom used to do an off-the-cuff sort of thing every week. He'd make up a drink on the spot, and that would become the bar's specialty drink whenever he was on shift for the rest of the week. Because they'd only make it when he was on shift, because only he would make that special drink, people would overwhelm the bar when he was working, to the point that the park had to start mixing up his shifts a bit just to manage it. He was fine with that. He loved the attention. As I said, the man was a hell of a showman. Tom did not like Billy Bones, not one bit. He didn't hide it well either. If Billy came in during Tom's shift, and he often did since Tom worked 5 or 6 days a week for most of the year, you would catch a notable change in Tom's mood. His face would darken. His near-perpetual smile would turn into a thin line. If Billy came close, say, visiting a table very close to the bar, and you had the right angle on Tom, you could see him scowl as if he was physically repulsed. I saw this happen enough that I finally asked Tom one evening what exactly it was bothered him about Billy Bones. He nodded thoughtfully at the question, as if processing how best to answer. You'll think I'm a crazy man. It's not worthy of your time, friend. No, Tom, I won't, I promised. I won't think you're crazy. We both work in the theme park for a living as grown adult men. We wear costumes. We pretend to live in the 18th century. And a fictional version of it at that. He laughed at that. Fair enough. Here's a question. Did your father serve during the war? Did he tell you anything about it? I told him that my father had been in the Merchant Marine during the war. Survived a Japanese torpedo attack. Well, good for him, he said. I'm glad he got out all right. He smiled. Well, I did serve, and I mention that because it's the only other time in my life that I've felt that way, being in an active war zone. What? You think Billy Bones is a Japanese sleeper agent? I joked. He shook his head. The smile was still there. It did not touch his eyes. No. One of the island landings, one of those tiny islands that was supposed to fall in a day and took weeks, my unit was stalked by a sniper. He'd harass us constantly, follow our movements. Somebody goes out to take a piss in the morning, sniper takes a shot. On the advance through cover or in the open, sniper takes a shot. Leaning against a wall of sandbags and quietly complaining about the weather, sniper takes a shot. Once I was having a conversation with a corpsman I'd come to know. We were in very heavy cover. We were talking about how the Japanese were petering out, finally. As soon as those words left our lips, a shot rang out. A coconut fell. I don't know, maybe 100 yards from us at most. Hell, that must have been terrifying, I conceded. It was, Tom continued. But that's what a sniper does. He's a peculiar sort of predator. He doesn't shoot at just anything that moves. He doesn't select his targets randomly. At his most effective, he hounds his targets to death. He weakens them to the breaking point, and then takes somebody out. Hell, maybe he doesn't kill more than 2 or 3 men total over the course of a month. The point is to damage your morale. Put politely, to scare you shitless. Are you saying you think Billy Bones is gonna shoot you? I asked it with a grin, but I wasn't quite kidding. He darkened notably. No, but my experience of that sniper put me on edge. It woke up that latent gene that warned us in the early days about stalking bobcats, mountain lions, and saber-toothed tigers. I was constantly looking for somebody to be hunting me, and I get that feeling from Billy Bones. Whoever it is wearing that costume, I get the feeling that he has a predatory aspect. I don't see it, honestly, I said. Of course you don't, Tom said, that smile returning. That's why you're asking me. And I'm telling you, friend, that one, there's something dangerous about him, something predatory. And it makes me distinctly uneasy. Watch him. Keep an eye out. And if something strange happens, well, we trailed off. And so that was the end of that subject in our conversation. Tom sensed a predator in Billy Bones, at least the person wearing the suit. It made him uneasy, made him believe that Billy might be up to no good. I must admit that it certainly affected the way I saw Billy from then on. After that conversation, when I saw Billy, that conversation would replay in my head, you see. And I'd think about Tom's warning that Billy's operator was a predator. Never really stopped liking Billy, but I was a lot more cautious. And I noticed at least one thing that seemed to gel with Tom's assessment. Billy, you see, he tended to linger. And he'd linger in some places just a fraction too long. You'd see Billy standing in the corner of the gallery or the dining room, looking out over the guests. You'd see him beginning to move on to the next room, and then, in a change of heart, he'd stop himself from moving almost as quickly as he'd started. The movement would cease, and that big cartoony head would incline itself just slightly, like it was focusing on something. Often I'd notice this. Often I'd follow those big hollow eyes. They always seemed to lead to a specific table, usually one with kids, a specific customer, always an adult. And they'd linger there just a moment longer. Once I saw a family catch that. Big, hulkish-looking dad, small, pale mother, a little girl. The father turned his eyes and locked them on Billy. Billy didn't react. But when the wife followed her husband's gaze and the child followed, Billy waved. And I swear to you, as I live and breathe, he waved to that child as if the parents weren't even there. That little girl, she looked so sad before. She lit up, and she smiled. The parents, though, especially that father, they seemed confused. The mother was worried. The father looked, just this side of angry. Clearly, it had an effect. They did not like being looked at by that man in a costume. Wasn't the last time I'd see that or something like that. On the occasions when Tom was there and Billy lingered, it was always seeming to be when Tom was in the room. Sometimes, if you watched him closely enough, it seemed as if Billy's eyes was tracking Tom. Sometimes they'd seem to focus on the same things Tom was focusing on. Tom would look over at a family, and Billy's eyes would track him. He'd smile at a kid, and Billy's eyes would track Tom. I think Tom was conscious of that too, because he'd glare at Billy. And Billy, silly old Billy Bones, would wave delightedly and continue on his route. In December 1984, I went home to spend the holidays with my parents. River cruise, I'd say, for a solid year to afford. My first long vacation in years, too. Came back in late January. When I did, I got back into the swing of things easily enough. But the long absence made me notice things that were unfamiliar. And the most unfamiliar of these was Tom's absence. He wasn't there on my first day back, nor indeed on my second, nor indeed even at the end of my first week. Now, Tom was not one to take vacations. He's what Americans call a workaholic. The man worked 5 to 6 days a week minimum, and the entire time we'd worked there together, I had seen him take more than a weekend off, I don't know, a total of 3 or 4 times at most. I assumed, thank goodness for him, he's probably taken everybody's advice and allowing himself a proper holiday. Felt he deserved it. But this was still so strange that when the next week began and the manager asked me if I'd seen Tom, well, we pretty much knew we had ourselves a problem. Now, Tom Weller had indeed taken time off, 2 weeks in January, a virtual year-long trip off to explore the known world by Tom's standards. But he was supposed to have returned around the same time I did, and he didn't. At first, they let this go. Tom was already working lots and lots of hours. He was a huge draw, and I think perhaps they decided to show him some grace. But when Tom was still not there after a solid week, they was concerned in management. Our manager asked me when I'd last seen Tom. I told her that I'd last seen him on the 8th of December, the day before I set off on my holiday with my mom and dad. She asked if I'd talked to him since. I had not. She asked if I knew where he lived. I'd never been in the house, but I'd seen it often enough on my way to work. It was a little detached house with a brick facade and a blue roof. An unusual design for that state. Charming. Do you think, she sighed. Look, I don't want to fire him. You two are friends, more or less. Yeah? I said that I considered Tom a friend. Not someone I knew very well outside work, but we'd often made time to chat, had lunch together quite a few times. Do you think you could check on him? She asked. He's a good worker, but I'm getting a lot of pressure from management. I want to avoid him getting into trouble. Now, she implied that perhaps if I visited and found him in, I might discover that he'd been sick and too ill to use the phone. I got it. Rescued Tom from possibly being written up or fired. Seemed fitting. He was my friend, and he was sort of a star of the attraction. Nobody wanted to see him sacked. So I agreed. Next afternoon, I drove to Tom's little house, parked in front, just behind his blue-gray Renault, and I knocked on that door. There was no answering sound. No barking of dogs or yowling of cats. Tom apparently had neither. There were no children, so far as I knew, and I was unaware of any life partner. It was just Tom. Tom's little house with a blue roof and a blue car. Hey, Tom, I raised my voice. Tom, you there? We're worried about you. Wanted to check in and... Still no answer. I tried for a good 30 minutes, knocking on the windows, peeking around the back. No Tom, and I was very, very worried about that. What if something had happened to him? I began to think I'd have to force my way in or get to the road, find a phone, and call in the police. Neither ended up being immediately necessary. Upon trying the door, I found that it was unlocked. Opened easily enough, The house was quiet, save for the slight crackle of static leading from what I presumed to be a living area. It was indeed a living room, or maybe a den, if you think of it that way. There was a stereo record player, and there was a turntable, and that turntable was a turning and turning with a disc rotating on the spindle. The playing arm had returned to the edge of the disc. Apparently, the record had played itself all the way through. I had a look, sort of laughed to myself. The record was by a Danish new wave band that was popular at the time. Don't get me wrong, I actually liked that kind of music, but Tom didn't seem so much like a new wave type to me. More Bauhaus than Kajagoogoo or Haircut 100. Through the living room, there was an archway, and beyond that archway, there was a light. "Tom," I called out. "Tom, are you here? Everything okay? I can get help if..." Past the archway, there was a wall phone. Avocado killer. Very much vomit-inducing holdover crap from the 1970s, the most tacky decade in all of human history. On the hook, of course, so nothing dramatic there. And just beyond that, there was a little kitchen. And the smell of copper. A smell that, I'm sorry to say, heralds exactly what you might think it does. There, within a little blue kitchen, with a lovely view of the little blue house with a little blue car, was a little stove and a little matching fridge. The remnants of a meal, probably not more than a day or two old, could be seen, and a counter was linking the two. A plate, 2 slices of bread, a jar of mayonnaise. He'd been making a sandwich, and I know exactly what had happened. I will spare you the worst details. I will simply tell you that Tom was there, very much dead, face up on the floor. There was a look of terror etched onto his face, and a small and recently congealed pool of the thing that was giving off that copper odor spreading beneath him. Pinning him in place, very plainly, plain as day, was a sword that looked like a cartoonish combination of cutlass and rapier. Sharp enough to cut a semi-frozen cake. Certainly sharp enough to impale a grown former U.S. Marine. Now, the aliases I'm using to cover my ass aside, you may have guessed that Tom Weller wasn't actually Tom Weller. His real name was completely different. The man who called himself Tom did indeed serve in the Marine Corps during the Second World War, then on into Korea. But Tom's record was not exactly model. He had combat commendations, sure, but he had a number of disciplinary charges too. Fellow Marines accused him of an explosive temper. One even claimed Tom had tried to kill him in combat, though that couldn't be proven, and so the two were reassigned to new units. His eventual discharge, around 1955, was not something he'd particularly wanted. It was not the most amicable of discharges, but it was not, at least, a dishonorable. Now, before the war, there was a famous nightclub in New York. Very famous. You've seen it parodied in movies and cartoons. It was notorious because 4 people, a hostess, 2 cigarette girls, and a short-order cook, had gone missing over a few months and showed up floating in the Hudson, beaten to death. Then there was a club in Los Angeles, and a pair of waitresses were found beaten and then stabbed to death in the freezer attached to the club on the evening of the Pearl Harbor attack, an event that sort of buried the lead that a pair of women had been brutally murdered at a place patronized by Hollywood stars. After his discharge, the same pattern escalated. Instead of beatings and stabbings of men and women, there was families. Pretty awful stuff. 1 in Okinawa, 1 in Las Vegas, 2 in London, 1 in Paris. They had all one thing in common. Tom Weller, or a man fitting his description, had worked as a bartender in every one of these locations. A co-worker claims that Tom was even a person of interest in the Dahlia murder, though I'm not sure whether he was stateside when that happened. We never saw Billy Bones in the park again. Park management, when I asked, said they decided to go in a different direction.
The first theme parks as we understand them probably evolved from the pleasure fairs of the Middle Ages, though that is of course a matter of debate. Certainly, something approaching a private pleasure park could be identified as early as Louis XIV's France, at Versailles, complete with rides and attractions. And no, that doesn't include the parties, feasts, and other bits of courtly corruption that typified the place. Carnival, things like carnivals, go back thousands of years in the Old World, with examples in Europe, Asia, and Africa. I shouldn't wonder that there aren't ancient and terrible things that originate within them as well. Perhaps the display of emotion at such a heightened level attracts things best left in the darkness. Though not all of them are so bad, if some of the stories tonight are to be believed. I used to avoid family reunions on principle. Perhaps, had theme parks been a major concern in my youth, I might well have avoided them, too. That will do it for us this evening, dear friends. We'll speak to you again in the next one. But remember, not all heroes wear white hats or cheerful rodent costumes. Some wear quite the opposite, and some predators hide best amongst those to whom they bring joy. Fear not, however, for you are not alone in this. Have faith. We know.
Tonight's story was written by Faceless Sphinx and is used with his very kind permission. Our audio engineering tonight was done by Creative Minds Audio. Thank you again for listening. A reminder that we are now available on most major platforms for podcasts and other audio formats. So check us out there if you like. We'll see you in the next one. All of the content in this broadcast and all associated media has, as ever, been treated with the Nagoya mimetic.
86, 47, 13, 9. Broadcast ends.